Hey, welcome to the final video in our Industrial Revolution series with Mr. Salagaris. Today in our masterclass, we're going to learn about making the world a better place. If this fly leaves me alone. Okay, so in our previous videos, we looked at the Industrial Revolution in terms of agricultural revolution, cottage versus factory production, transport, child labor, and the industries that were dominant during this period of time. Okay, hey, did the Industrial Revolution make the world a better place or not? That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to learn about the advances and improvements and at what cost those advances and improvements came to us. Okay, technology and production and industry. We know a little bit about that already. We've learned that in previous videos. Things like communications, the harnessing of electricity and technology related to that, and factory production and the benefits that caused in terms of the availability of products to people. Okay, agriculture is another one that we've already learned about in our video on agricultural revolution. There was an increase in productivity and the efficiency of farming processes and practices, mostly caused by increased knowledge on how to farm better, but also the access to machinery and products like that. Okay, that meant that there was greater food availability to people, which meant that there was better variety of food, which meant that there was a better diet for people at the time. All important things for survival. Medicine, a better understanding of medicine came about during this period of time. Technology also helped in the treatment of diseases and medical ailments and stuff like that. So technology, the advances in understanding were all important things for medicine at that time, which meant that obviously mortality rates and death rates decreased as that understanding improved. Science also took a huge leap in development during this period of time. There was a better understanding of the world and how it worked, particularly in the area of chemistry. The periodic table of elements was started to get put together. So we started to understand that the world around us was made up of things like atoms and elements, and an understanding of that helped us to improve the world around us, mostly just our knowledge of chemistry and how the world worked. One of those discoveries or the developments was in the area of radioactivity, which would later be used as a source of controversial energy later on after the Industrial Revolution. Okay, during that time, the standard of living improved. There was a better life expectancy, death rates decreased, living conditions increased, and working conditions increased as a result of laws and regulations which came about from unions pushing for better conditions, pays, and less hours. Also, government policies and legislation helped in that process of increasing working conditions. So things like children only being allowed to work for a certain number of hours a week, increased pay for those people, and better standards of working conditions. Also, another thing was the development of urban planning. So better public transport available to people, better planned development of cities and living areas, and also the process of suburbanization, where people started to live out of the cities because of the access to public transport at that time. Okay, so when I was putting together this, it kind of made me a little bit sad because I had to consider at what cost was the Industrial Revolution brought about, and that made me think about child labor. Okay, so children during that time had to work while it was good for them. Well, it wasn't really good for them. They had to work during this period of time. That meant that they missed out on education. They missed out on having a childhood, and there was also health and psychological problems associated with it. So with those kids that get sold into work in the factories by their parents, obviously we talked about the psychological damage that can cause, and the health problems associated with working in factories and things like coal mines. There's that death and injury that can cause by kids working in those sort of jobs. So that's incredibly sad. Next point that I wanted to talk about was consumerism, which is the idea of consuming goods or acquiring goods and services in an ever increasing amount. So the availability of goods led to people wanting to have an increased amount of goods and services, which in turn created, well, sort of brought to the forefront or exemplified or highlighted people's greed and selfishness. That's probably something that's even seen today with consumerism in our world that we live in. Okay, the next thing was social and cultural issues. So as a result of things like unemployment, people turned to drugs and alcohol, which had its own problems and issues for people's health, increased crime, all that stuff. There's poor living conditions, which had obviously some social and cultural issues involved with that. Things like sewage, waste, houses that people lived in. Emotional and psychological problems were also a problem of this. So people being seen as less than humans. So the Africans that were enslaved and taken to America to work on the cotton farms, obviously were seen, well, they thought of themselves as less than humans because they were forced to work in unfair circumstances. So that actually still has flow-on effects into the world that we see today, particularly in America for African American rights. Okay, there was also a high mortality rate and death rate during this time, and there was that feeling of not feeling loved or wanted for those people who were forced to work those long hours and treated very unfairly by their employers, and also that struggle for survival. During that period of time, there was an increased rate of crime, which led to things like the Commonwealth establishing colonies in places like Australia because they ran out of place to house criminals. And the last issue was environmental problems caused by the Industrial Revolution. So things like pollution, air and water, land clearing, which caused deforestation and problems to the environments around these big cities, and that overexploitation of non-renewable sources. So things like harvesting or over mining things like coal. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you go back and watch this again to learn more about the problems that were caused from the Industrial Revolution, but also the advances and the good things that have come from that. Hey, thank you so much for watching. My name is Mr. Salagaris. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and like I keep saying, watch it again if there are points that you missed.